Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, and I am your host, Ryan Basulto. Sorry I sound a little raspy today, bear with me. I am really excited. I was probably just yelling too much of excitement for the NFL Draft. Welcome back. We are here with a good edition of Winners and Losers. I am going to go over all the winners and losers in my perspective after the 2021 NFL Draft. It was this past Thursday through Sunday. It was simply amazing. Loved every minute of it. We're excited. Some things went normal, like Trevor Lawrence getting picked first, Zach Wilson getting picked second. We talked about all that. Some things that are different. Chase Horn going to the Panthers instead of them getting a lineman, which I feel would have been a little better for them. But we'll get more back into that. We are going to go over the winners and losers. Let's start off with something good. Let's start off with something really nice. Let's start off with the winner, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers finally got its running back. This is the guy I've been bragging about. I've been talking about. Imagine if this guy goes to this team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, how amazing the Steelers were, especially since former running back James Conner, who is now on the Arizona Cardinals, is now gone. So, now they have what I was saying all this time would be a fantasy match made in heaven. Najee Harris, running back of Alabama. Pittsburgh was struggling last year, only averaging 3.6 yards per carry, and their offense was just looking terrible towards the second half. Harris's ability to close in the red zone and catch the ball out of the backfield will be a huge plus for the team, because you got to also think about it too. Fantasy points, if you're playing PPR like I am, which I think is a great way to play. It maximizes the points and the full potential of every single game in fantasy football. Love it the most. But a winner would be Steelers fans and Najee Harris and PPR people who are loving this. Najee Harris showed a lot of consistency in the national championship. He caught 7 touchdowns, and he also rushed. Well, he caught 7 touchdowns, 7 catches for 70-plus yards, and a couple of touchdowns, and he also rushed a couple of touchdowns and rushing for 70 yards. This guy's like Alvin Kamara. He could catch, he could run. He is a complete back that you can use like a Le'Veon Bell. This would fit so perfect. They have the receivers, as I've been bragging about. The Pittsburgh Steelers have Chase Claypool. They have Deontay Johnson, who I think is the best, probably the best fantasy option. Chase Claypool is probably going to have a good year too, but they also have Juju Smith. Great receiving core, fantasy perspective as well, because they all caught for over 900 yards last year. And now you add Najee Harris to that group to make a actual good running game. 230 pounds, folks. Over 6 foot. Derrick Henry type of build. He could catch. He could run. He could truck you. He could hurdle defenders. You've seen him do it. He's hurdled people clean. He's an athletic monster. He is a perfect fit for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I'm so excited because Big Ben, you got to also think too, he has to keep up with these running teams in the AFC North. They also have the Ravens, who are a heavy run team, number one rush offense in the NFL. They have the Browns, who are one of the top rush offenses in the NFL. It's tough, and you got to keep up, especially after you lost James Conner. The Steelers were last in rushing yards per game last year with 84.4 yards per game, which is completely terrible, especially Pittsburgh Steelers fans, because they've had a plethora of great running backs: Le'Veon Bell, Jerome Bettis, all these people. Najee Harris, what I'm saying in the end, is a top 3-round pick. I would get him in the second round. If you are anyone out there, just if you're someone who works well during the season, because I'm someone who thrives off the waiver wire. I could pick up people. I look at the statistics. I look at the reports. I kind of just piece things together. If you're someone who's kind of like that, Najee Harris would be a great pick for you to get early, because he's someone who you could see breaking on the second part of the season, probably as soon as they realize, oh man, this guy's great, which he definitely is. Should have been a top 10 pick, but since there was so many great quarterbacks, linemen, and running backs, it was tough. But Najee Harris, definitely a huge, huge winner. It's not even a question, the top winner out of all of them. I would get him top 3 rounds. He's going to catch. He's going to run. Big Ben's getting old too. He's going to have to do checkdowns more. He can't always throw the deep balls. Loser. It's a little sad. Sorry. Bring out the fake violin. Shed the tears. The Packers. It didn't matter who the Packers honestly selected. Aaron Rodgers just wants to be out of Green Bay. And I ranked Green Bay a top 3 fantasy offense on my pre-draft rankings. This is why I said the draft makes everything. It's getting closer. He is upset. And the Packers didn't even get Rashad Bateman with the first pick. They ended up settling for Georgia cornerback Eric Stokes. A cornerback is something that they needed, because you saw it a lot with Kevin King. He was getting torched by Scotty Miller in the NFC Championship game. So you know that that's what they need as a team. But Aaron Rodgers not being on that fantasy offense is going to completely shatter it. And if they don't figure out a way to satisfy him or make him happy, he's going to leave to the Broncos. And if he goes to the Broncos, just know the Broncos are a top 5 fantasy offense. I don't know if I'd put them top 3 like I did the Packers, because they don't have an elite receiver like Devontae Adams, but they do have way better receiving core. You got to also think about they have Courtland Sutton, who was out all last year with an injury, and Tim Patrick, along with the rookie Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler, who is a sleeper and a great slot corner with Noah Fant, Melvin Gordon, and then a big winner, who I'm going to mention a little later. They added another running back. But yes, Aaron Rodgers is not happy there. Reports are saying that he wants the GM to be kicked out. He's saying him or me. He's also saying, I'm going to retire if I have to stay with the Green Bay Packers. So the only 2 teams he's convinced in are the Raiders. Let's think about it. If he goes to the Raiders, that run game is going to be absolutely insane. Because I don't care if you're Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, Tim Tebow, whoever you are, Jalen Hurts, doesn't matter. John Gruden loves to run the ball. And he's going to run the ball, especially now that he added Kenyon Drake and he added Josh Jacobs. He still will let Aaron Rodgers throw 25 to 30 times a game, but it's nothing ridiculous. Aaron Rodgers will probably have a big say in it, and maybe we'll see John Gruden change his ways, but I doubt it. I feel like John Gruden likes to run the ball majority. That run game is going to be insane. There's no way they're going to stop it. They also added an offensive tackle, Alex Leatherwood from Alabama. Real big boy slapping meat. That's what they do on the offensive line. One of the top tackles coming out of the 2021 college draft. Aaron Rodgers is not happy. The Packers are losing. They're losing bad right now. They also said reports, I put it on Twitter as well, that they wanted to move up in last year's draft to obtain wide receiver Justin Jefferson, who was on the Minnesota Vikings, who, by the way, had 88 catches, 1,400 yards, and over 10 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson is an animal, and now they're just saying this report just so they could backtrack. And, you didn't hear that last year when it was coming around. Now all of a sudden they're saying this report just to try to get Aaron Rodgers back. Davante Adams also tweeted today, you got to appreciate things while you still got it. Last time someone posted something like that, or tweeted something like that, you got to appreciate something, or you want to appreciate it till it's gone, was Stephon Diggs, and he ended up leaving to the Buffalo Bills, who are a top 2 fantasy offense. If Aaron Rodgers leaves the Packers, Davante Adams loses stock value. Aaron Jones gets a little bit more, I'd probably say, because they might check down a little more because they're not as good. And Matt LaFleur is technically a running head coach. He was the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans before he was hired as a coach. He was offensive coordinator. He was the coach for the Tennessee Titans before he moved on and then went on to start his career part of the Green Bay Packers. Big loser. They're the biggest losers out of all of them right now. They don't know what they're doing, and they might lose one of the top fantasy quarterbacks and MVP of last season in Aaron Rodgers. Big winner, Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. This is huge. Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith got picked in the top 10 picks. Jalen Waddle got picked with the 6th pick with the Dolphins pick, which was the biggest surprise, but he averaged 18.9 yards per catch, and it's going to be a crazy vertical threat for Tua. That is also Tua's former receiver. They played on the Crimson Tide together. So a big reason why Jalen Waddle is a big winner is because he's reunited with his college quarterback. They already have that rapport. They believe in him. I like Jalen Waddle a lot on the Dolphins. I would rank him 3 or 2, most likely 2, on my top fantasy receivers going into next year. Jalen Waddle also had less time to play as these other receivers at Alabama because he was behind Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, who else? Devontae Smith. All these legendary receivers. He was behind them all, so he couldn't play that much. Now he's going to get his chance to play. He is not as injury prone as those other guys as well, so he's going to come out fresh legs, shows that he has big explosive ability. Only guy in college football last year to have like 280 plus touchdowns, only receiver to have 280 plus touchdowns last year. Jalen Waddle is a big play waiting to happen, and that is what the Dolphins offense is all about. It's going to help Tua stock a lot for me because Devontae Parker is very injury prone. Mike Gesicki, the tight end, is very injury prone. Preston Williams was hurt most last year, and he's extremely injury prone. Let's not start about Will Fuller. We know that Will Fuller has the potential to be a top 5 to 10 fantasy wide receiver because all he does is go deep, and he's faster than everyone, and he gets touchdowns. Got touchdowns all but one game last year until he got hurt, like he does per usual, where he always balls out till he falls out. So, and that also was with Deshaun Watson, by the way, who led the league in passing yards and is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Nothing like Tua at all. No way. So, Jalen Waddle is getting it from a B- to B quarterback. Jalen Waddle, I would still look at, unless you see Jamar Chase or even Tooney. Tooney on the Giants is still pretty good. We'll talk about him too. But yeah, Jalen Waddle on the Dolphins is a good pickup. Just get him where you got Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb last year. 6th, 7th round. Take a flyer on him. I like him. I like him on this offense a lot. I'm really excited to see what they'll look about that. But we were talking about it. The Raiders. I would say they're a loser in this one. In their first round last year, they got Henry Ruggs, who was like, he was like an inconsistent receiver. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith also went to the Eagles. He's with his quarterback now, Jalen Hurts, who he played with in college. It's a good rapport that they're going to already have with it. So that's something you just don't have to worry about it at all. Devontae Smith, I'm not as high on. That's why I guess I kind of glanced over him. But Jalen Waddle, more high on. Devontae Smith, I would draft at round 10, kind of like where you drafted Henry Ruggs last year. I wouldn't. He's too small. He's a glorified Deshaun Jackson, but if Jalen Hurts throws the ball accurately, we'll see. But I don't know if Jalen Hurts could throw it accurately. Losers are the Raiders. They got Henry Ruggs with the pick last year. They had, who I said was inconsistent. The year before that, they took Cleveland Farrell, a defensive end, and he only had 6.5 sacks in 2 seasons. And now this year, they took Alex Leatherwood, the offensive tackle. Like I said, the big boy slapping meat. He was going in most mock drafts. He was going in the 2nd round. So I don't know why they want another tackle, but that's why I said the big reason what they're doing is that they're going to promise Aaron Rodgers, look, we got rid of Trent Williams, we got rid of the older guys on the line. We're going to get these young guys. They're huge, they're ready, they're fresh. Aaron Rodgers, we got a great run game behind us. We could just add another receiver, just in free agency, or even trade for another receiver. So we'll just make sure we have the great line. I don't know why they got 4 safeties, which is good for the defense, but a little confusing as well. I don't understand what the Raiders are going for. They needed a receiver. Would have been good if they got a receiver or even a linebacker to make that fantasy defense better. The Raiders, their defense was horrendous last year. I wouldn't even count on them. They're 25th in the NFL in allowed yards per game. If they should have got a linebacker, as I said before, because they were giving up the 15th most rushing yards in the league. So it's tough. It's tough. Not 15th, sorry, 25th most rushing yards in the league. It's tough. It's really, really tough. I don't know why Raiders do Raiders things, but that's why I usually stay away from them. I'm not going to really draft a Raider this year. They have Darren Waller. That's another thing they could sell to Aaron Rodgers, which is Darren Waller, top 2 tight end. If you're not drafting Travis Kelce, Darren Waller right next. That's a given. That's already, there's nothing difficult about that. He was a number 2 tight end last year. I was a fool last year because in the first 2 weeks they offered me Travis Kelce for Darren Waller. I didn't take the trade because you always think, what if Travis Kelce falls off? And Darren Waller is the most viable option on that Raiders offense. So you can't really trust anyone else. That's why he's such a good option. I was like, I don't know about it, but they ended up trading for Travis Kelce. The Raiders, like I said, have one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and I think they're banking on that they might be able to just get Aaron Rodgers, and that's why they got their linemen. The Raiders will just continue to always go against the grain when it comes to what mock drafts say or anyone says they should get. In a mock draft I came up with, or just doing my research, I said that they were going to get Christian Barmore, defensive tackle from Alabama. That would have made, more sense for the Raiders, but I don't get what they're trying to go for. They usually always have linemen, but I guess they needed another one to just ensure Aaron Rodgers that they're going to have just rookies for days, because the Raiders were hurt on the offensive line last year. They got 3 key injuries, including one of their better centers. They got rid of their center as well, Rodney Hudson. So I don't think the Raiders know how to prioritize who they want in the draft. It's confusing. They needed a linebacker. That was one of the bigger things that they needed. I guess they didn't see it, or even a premier corner that could have helped too, because the Raiders were just absolutely awful against the pass last year. They were 28th in the league at allowing 263 yards in the air and a 63% completion percentage. And like I always say, if quarterbacks throw over 60%, that's really, really good, and that shouldn't be good for a defense. The Raiders only have Henry Ruggs and Darren Waller. And Tyrell Williams, who's very injury prone, and I would not suggest drafting. Like I said, the only people I would draft next year are Darren Waller, and if for some miracle reason that Josh Jacobs falls to the 4th round, I would get Josh Jacobs. But I just don't like it because Kenyon Drake's going to completely take away from all his value. Josh Jacobs does get hurt. He got hurt 3 games last year, and if he were to get hurt, Kenyon Drake's going to automatically take all the love. John Gruden doesn't seem like he wants a fantasy-friendly offense besides, like I said, giving it to Darren Waller, and that's only because he's 6'6", and you can't teach that. So, Raiders are a big loser in my book. When we come back, we are going to give some more winners and losers. Maybe the Cowboys are some winners, maybe the Broncos. I don't know about like the Panthers and stuff, but we'll see.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We are back here at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, the best fantasy football podcast of all the fantasy football podcasts. Yes, and I am still Ryan Basulto. I still have a raspy voice. I don't know if you could bear with me, but if you could, I was giving winners and losers in the last segment. I'm going to do it all throughout the show. There's a lot of winners and losers just because the draft just happened. I'm so happy the draft happened this past Thursday. It was very interesting because some people were predicted to go to some places like Trevor Lawrence, but then there were some people like the Oakland Raiders who said, I don't want a defense. I don't want a receiver. I want an offensive lineman again because I think they're just going to try to run the ball majority of the time. They didn't get 2 900-plus yard rushers in Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs just cuss. And it definitely wasn't that. Yes, I am going to still keep on with the keeping on. Another winner that I have from the draft was the Dallas Cowboys. They were in a difficult position after my favorite team, the Denver Broncos, but I'm not favoriting the Broncos. Trust me. I always tell you, don't draft a Bronco, ever, unless it's Noah Fant later in the rounds. But if Aaron Rodgers goes, they'd be a great offense. But that's all in a candy fairyland. The Broncos got Patrick Surtain. That's who the Cowboys wanted. So what did they do? Instead of trying to be like, oh, let's just try to get another offensive weapon to make up for it, or, they could have got a lineman, which could have helped as well. But that defense, that awful, awful defense that allowed 29.6 points per game. Yes, that is awful. One of the worst teams in the NFL at points per game average on defense. They added Micah Parsons, linebacker from Penn State. This should help a lot, especially after Sean Lee, one of the better linebackers in Cowboy history, retired this past week. Parsons is going to step up right away. He was the best defensive player left on the draft. Only one defensive player taken in front of him was J.C. Horn on the Panthers, but Micah Parsons, he's a shifty guy. He will be able to fit with the Cowboys' defensive scheme. He could play alongside Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith if Micah Parsons could bring them together, because Jalen Smith was pretty much giving a big play after big play after big play every single time on that Cowboys defense. He could help him out and step up. It's just all a matter of consistency for the Cowboys because they are very injury prone. Those linebackers like Van Der Esch, he gets concussions or hurts a shoulder. And then we have Jalen Smith, who doesn't get hurt as much, but he hurts them on defense. So if Micah Parsons could stay healthy and doesn't get hurt, that should be a big plus to the Oakland Raiders. I like that pick by the Oakland Raiders, by the Dallas Cowboys. I like that pick a lot. One of the bigger drafts, though, one of the people that had the better drafts was the San Francisco 49ers. They got Trey Lance, and they got Trey Sermon, running back from the Ohio State University. Trey Sermon was one of the better running backs in all of college last year. The Pittsburgh Steelers said that if they did not get Najee Harris in the first round, that they would have set their eyes on Trey Sermon. That just shows how much respect Trey Sermon demanded, especially from a team that wants to really utilize their running backs as much as they can. Trey Sermon and Trey Lance will be a threat on that offense. It's crazy because Trey Lance is a consistent quarterback. He's someone kind of like who they want because he's a more mobile, kind of safe like Jimmy G. He only threw for 9.7 yards per attempt in his full season at North Dakota State in 2019 because he opted out last year. Well, he didn't opt out. It was just Corona hit, and then they didn't proceed the rest of their season, North Dakota State. So in the full sample size that we got, Trey Lance was able to throw accurately, 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, over 60%. He was able to run in the championship game. He rushed for 144 yards, and that's exactly a big staple in that San Francisco 49ers offense. So with Trey Lance and injury-prone running backs like Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr., who was hurt for 3 games last year as well, Trey Sermon could step in and be one of the top running backs in that offense, kind of like a Matt Breida. Matt Breida had speed, and he was able to have good pass catching ability. They don't have Tevin Coleman anymore. He went to the New York Jets. So Trey Lance, I would not draft him in fantasy because you don't know. I think Jimmy G is going to start, and then I feel like Trey Lance is someone you could get on the waiver wire after Jimmy G gets his first injury. You should get him early. But I don't know if people are really high on Trey Lance. I feel like Jimmy G is just going to start, so I wouldn't draft him because he'll be useless in the beginning. And then maybe someone will drop him in your league, and then they'll be like, oh, no, there's no hope in him. And then week 5, Jimmy G is going to get hurt. Trey Lance is going to step in. Trey Sermon, someone I would take a late round pick on, like 14, 15, 13 round. I would take a pick on Trey Sermon because, once again, Raheem Mostert is really injury prone. Last year he missed over 7 games. He showed that he can't be an every down back. So now they're going to try to, hand it off to Trey Sermon and see how that goes. But Trey Sermon, I have more faith in drafting than I would Trey Lance. Someone who is a winner in some ways and a loser in others is the Bengals. The Bengals are losers because they should have got an offensive lineman. They were the most sacked team. Joe Burrow was one of the most hit quarterbacks in the NFL. Also, they had to get Jamar Chase, though. That's why I'm saying they're a winner in a sense, because Jamar Chase, when he did have that full sample size with the now quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase still caught over 20 touchdowns, 1,700 yards. Dude's an animal. He knows how to catch at the point of the highest point of the ball. He ripped Patrick Surtain. He's ripped Alabama corners. He's ripped Florida corners. He's ripped the cream of the crop of college prospects. So I guess I'm not wary of Jamar Chase in any way with Joe Burrow. I feel like he's a wide receiver 1. He's going to have over 1,000 yards next year like Justin Jefferson. He's going to, he's not a wide receiver 1. He's a wide receiver 2, but he's definitely going to put up wide receiver 2/wide receiver 1 numbers. I would get Jamar Chase within the first 5 rounds. I would be as confident that he's going to play like CeeDee Lamb, like kind of how you were last year when you were saying, oh, maybe CeeDee Lamb will pan out just because they have Amari Cooper on one side, Michael Gallup on the other. The Bengals have the same predicament on their end. They have Tyler Boyd on one side, who's a really good receiver, and he's a good possession receiver. You need someone to get open for 10 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards. Tyler Boyd's your guy. And you have T. Higgins, who's another great red zone threat. So that's two people that you're always going to have to worry about. You also wonder why they didn't get a lineman if Joe Mixon always constantly gets hurt. And if he's going to constantly get hurt, then you want to protect him, right? And Joe Burrow also got an injury in Week 12 in the NFL last year. You want to protect him, right? No, they didn't. So Jamar Chase is a winner because he's got his boy, but who knows how long that's going to last, because Jamar Chase most likely won't, but Joe Burrow could get hurt, Joe Mixon could get hurt, and that could ruin and tamper that run game because they need another running back. They don't have Giovanni Bernard, so if Joe Mixon gets hurt, then it's pretty much over for the Bengals run game, who was pretty irrelevant last year. They were bottom 10 in the NFL. They didn't look as good without Joe Mixon, and Joe Mixon was out within like the 5th week. So the Bengals were losers in this, but Jamar Chase was a winner. A winner, in my book especially, is the Atlanta Falcons. They got Kyle Pitts. Now you have to worry about Julio Jones, Kyle Pitts, and Calvin Ridley. Kyle Pitts' fantasy value is huge because Matt Ryan could throw any pass on the money. Matt Ryan has led the league in completions the last 8 years, so you know he's just going to throw the ball a lot. Their defense didn't really get much added to it or anything impressive, so that means they're going to probably get scored on a lot more. They lost defensive coordinator, or not defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn, head coach, but also their defensive coordinator. I know they had one of the worst defenses. Besides that, giving up a whopping 398 total yards per game. That ranked 4th worst in the NFL. Only teams worse were the Texans, Jaguars, and Lions, who are all awful. So their defense is terrible, but Matt Ryan is fully capable of slinging rocks still. He's only 35. He should still have a couple good years left in him, but that's not even the thing, though. Kyle Pitts, not only is he over 6'6", and has the longest wingspan in NFL draft history, but Kyle Pitts is going to be paired with Julio Jones, who you have to respect, maybe even with the double team. Calvin Ridley, who was a top 5 fantasy receiver last year and had single digits in only one fantasy game last year, who I would draft in the top 2 rounds. Easily, Calvin Ridley's going to have a good year. I know it's going to hurt him a little bit, but I feel like Julio Jones is still going to get hurt and it's still going to be Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley. It's nothing bad for Calvin Ridley. This is just a plethora of riches for the Falcons offense, especially from a fantasy perspective. Their best running back now is only Mike Davis, who is a capable but not RB1 material, and they don't even know if they're going to have Todd Gurley next year. Mike Davis also is injury-prone time to time, so it's a little shaky on that run game. I have a lot more confidence in their passing game than their running game. Another loser, I hate to say it, but loser, Kirk Cousins. The Vikings had 4 picks in the 3rd round, and they spent on the first one, Kellen Mond. And this is just kind of a message like saying, hey, who's Kirk Cousins entering his 4th year as a Minnesota starter, and he's only 25-21, and he's getting an average of 35 sacks a game, so he's not releasing the ball fast enough. I think that Kirk Cousins' time is almost up there. His time's almost up. And Kellen Mond, who they've kind of compared to Dante Culpepper, he has a lot of potential out of Texas A&M. I think that if Kellen Mond were to join the team, I don't know how confident I would be in Justin Jefferson and all these other guys, but Justin Jefferson for sure, and Adam Thielen are still one of the best duos, probably top 5 duos in NFL fantasy, because Justin Jefferson was number 11 in fantasy and Adam Thielen was 10 in fantasy last year. So you like that consistency. But Kirk Cousins is a great, capable quarterback of giving people the ball, especially when it comes to fantasy football. And this might not work out if they sour on Kirk Cousins and put him in a quarterback battle. You already saw that he didn't care for a quarterback battle when he was in one on the Washington football team with RG3. So it shows he has a big ego. You've seen his video where he said, "What, I did that," or whatever the heck he said. But Kirk Cousins has a big ego. He's not going to care for this too much, not one bit. He's a big loser in this, and this just kind of has a guy, looming over Kirk Cousins and always in the shadows like, hey, man, one bad game, which Kirk Cousins is fully capable of doing, especially when it's a primetime game where he's only 1-8, that, hey, man, if you mess up again, like, we'll just abandon you. We have a great run game with Dalvin Cook, who's one of the top running backs in the league, over 1,500 yards, over 15 touchdowns last year, especially one of the top fantasy running backs in all of fantasy football. Last year, he was number 2. And you have a great receiver in Justin Jefferson, who's new, just had over 80 receptions, 1,400 yards, over 10 touchdowns, and Adam Thielen, who's been consistent, another 1,000-yard receiver. You don't want to lose this opportunity if you're the Minnesota Vikings. So they drafted, a quarterback. I am also not happy they didn't draft Kwity Paye with their first pick. They should have got a D lineman. They need someone to give more of a presence on that defensive end. They used to have Anthony Barr, Michael Kendricks, and all these people. They still have them, but no one is making the same impact they did when that Minnesota Vikings was a top 5 defense and a top 5 fantasy defense 3 years ago. Kirk Cousins would not be someone I'm confident in drafting in fantasy next year. Another guy you could just see as a waiver wire pickup. He's someone who could drop decent numbers. He'll give you 15 to 25 fantasy points a game. Nothing to really win you a championship, but if he had a good week against the Lions or something in the fantasy playoffs, you just pick him up off a flyer. But do not draft Kirk Cousins. This is not a good sign for Kirk Cousins' fantasy stock value. Another winner in this draft are the Denver Broncos. They added a lot to their defense, getting a couple corners in the draft, including Patrick Surtain, who was said as the best, or if not the top 2 best corners in this draft. Coming out of Alabama, he's played the best competition out of most of these corners. The other corner taken was J.C. Horn before him, but Patrick Surtain was taken with the 9th pick, who the Cowboys should have gotten, but the Broncos got. And the Broncos not only got him to add to that fantasy defense, who's looking a little bit more ridiculous with Justin Simmons. They got 2 safeties. They got 2 cornerbacks. They added Kyle Fuller. They already have Von Miller. They have Bradley Chubb, who's capable of having over 10 sacks and in a season. They have capable linebackers. Now they added another corner, and then they added Javonte Williams, the guy I've been hyping up, the guy who was one of my top 3 favorite running backs coming out of the draft. He rushed for over 1,000 yards, and he was able to catch as well. Not as much as Michael Carter, but he was able to catch a lot out of the backfield. Javonte Williams is a great running back for the system, especially replacing Phillip Lindsay, who went to the Houston Texans, who I would also not advise drafting in. If you get Melvin Gordon for some reason in this next year's fantasy draft, because that's another player I'm not too confident I would really want to get. That line's good. If Aaron Rodgers gets added, like I said, one of the top 5, if not top 6, 7 fantasy offenses next year, because Aaron Rodgers MVP is just really accurate. He would have all the weapons with Noah Fant, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, who was hurt last year, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, and he would also be paired up in the backfield with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams to have a great 1-2 punch. They added mainly to the defense. The only thing they really got on the offense was Javonte Williams and another receiver, but Javonte Williams in the second round was a great pickup for this Broncos running offense. I think that I would take Javonte Williams, or if I would take Melvin Gordon, I would be more confident in Javonte because he has a lot of potential, and Melvin Gordon's kind of showed you what his not his ceiling, but what his full potential could be on the Broncos, which was only averaging less than 4 yards per carry, barely over 800 yards rushing, and something that just wasn't that impressive all last year. He was just too inconsistent. The Broncos' rush offense is 12th in the NFL, averaging 119, but it could have been a lot better. And losing Phillip Lindsay, who was been a longtime Bronco, got drafted by the Broncos. Actually didn't get drafted technically. He was an undrafted rookie free agent, but he was obtained by the Broncos as his first NFL team. He's now on the Texans. He's probably the best out of those running backs between Mark Ingram and David Johnson. But, along with the Texans, It's terrible. It's terrible over there. You wouldn't draft anyone on the Texans but Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon going into next year. Make that Broncos offense a lot better. It's also a ploy just to get Aaron Rodgers. They could have gotten Justin Fields. Justin Fields was still on the board at the 9th pick. So we'll see what they do. We'll see what they do more. But right now, the draft grade is not the best to me. But I think that they added to pieces that they needed to add to as long as they can obtain Aaron Rodgers. When we come back, we're going to give some more winners and losers from the draft that just happened this past week and more. Stick around.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ryan Basulto. We are here talking about the NFL Draft. We gave our winners like the Broncos, the Cowboys, Kyle Pitts, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle. Then we have our losers. We have the Packers, Kirk Cousins, just people who didn't gain anything in their stock value at all, especially when it comes to a fantasy perspective, since this is the Fantasy Football Podcast. We are going to start off with a winner. Another winner we are going to give is the Los Angeles Chargers. Their offensive line had some trouble last year. Justin Herbert was one of the most sacked quarterbacks, top 10 in the league, over 30 sacks. That is not something you want. You need Justin Herbert to be protected. He is your top first-round pick. So what do? In the first round, at number 13, they were able to get offensive tackle Rashawn Slater, one of the top 2 tackles on everyone's kind of mock draft. They all thought that he was going to go and end up on the Carolina Panthers. But the Carolina Panthers decided, hey, we want to answer defensive problems with J.C. Horn. I'm guessing they're thinking, okay, one of our better Super Bowl years were when we had a defense, which was that one time they went to the Super Bowl. So they're like, okay, we had Josh Norman. He seemed like he was a good piece to help out on our Super Bowl run. So we'll try to do the same thing with J.C. Horn. So Rashawn Slater and the Cowboys didn't want Rashawn Slater. The Broncos didn't want Rashawn Slater. So he fell all the way to 13th pick. The Chargers were blessed to have him because they were going to get Christian Darrisaw, who was the 3rd ranked offensive tackle on the board, but they ended up, luckily, with this guy. The Virginia Tech product is going to help out on that fantasy offense. This is a big plus for Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert especially, who broke the rookie record for passing yards and touchdowns last year, Baker Mayfield's previous records. They have Keenan Allen, who's a great receiver. I would draft probably Austin Eckler top 2 rounds. Justin Herbert, if you have to draft him, because I hate drafting quarterbacks, I would say 7th, 8th, 9th round. That's his value. He's definitely behind a Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen. But he's in that second tier of quarterbacks because last year he was a top 10 fantasy football quarterback, and you were almost able to get him off the waiver wire. So his value was extremely high. Now his value is a little less, so I don't know how high you want to go, but I'm really high on Austin Eckler. He was a great fit, and he was scoring 10-plus fantasy points in all but one game as soon as he came back from injury, along with another person that the Chargers drafted, Asante Samuel Jr. He fell to them at the 47th pick. The tackle and the cornerback were the Chargers' biggest needs, and they got both of them. They're going to be able to compete a lot better in this AFC West. That's crazy because the Raiders are still pretty good with John Gruden, Derek Carr, and that offensive line with Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake. And we already know what the Chiefs do. And if the Broncos or the Raiders are to add Aaron Rodgers, that could just make that division that much tougher. Big win for the Los Angeles Chargers. I like how they did their first couple rounds of drafting, especially when it comes to fantasy perspectives, because all it's going to do is help out and give more time and allow these playmakers to develop and make plays every single game here on out. Loser. And it's a shame. It's a shame because the loser is James Robinson, the undrafted rookie who was 4th in fantasy points if you played in a PPR format. He didn't catch too much, but he was more of a runner. Yes, the Jaguars were the 4th worst rushing team in the league, so the Jaguars had to pick up someone else. They drafted Trevor Lawrence with the first pick, who I would say definitely helps out that offense. But we all know that. There's not really much to talk about what Trevor Lawrence is going to do. It's just, what are you going to do now? You have Marvin Jones. You have Laviska Shenault. You have DJ Chark. You have a pretty solid receiving core. I don't know why they didn't get a tight end. I don't know why they didn't try to, I guess, get another position on the defensive side in the first round. But they saw Travis Etienne at 25, and they had to get him over 4,000 yards in total while he played at Clemson University. One of the better running backs coming out of the draft. Some would say he was a second-ranked prospect coming out of the draft. James Robinson is now not going to get all that touch and value that he did last year. They would give him the ball 20 to 25 times on average per game. He was the only running back in sight. And I guess since Trevor Lawrence wanted his boy, they had to get Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne has good fantasy value, but you don't know how much they're going to kind of work them both in. And it seems weird because James Robinson was an RB1 last year. Like I said, 4th best running back in the league. That's better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's better than Zeke. Obviously, Saquon, Christian McCaffrey were hurt, but still better than them. That was better than Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. He had a lot of fantasy points and especially great value, as some people were able to get him off the waiver wire. Like me, I traded him last year, granted, but it's because I didn't think the Jaguars were one of the worst teams in football last year. And I mean, not even one of the worst. They were the worst team in football. That's why they had the top pick. So I didn't trust that offense. I didn't trust having players on that offense. I thought it was just a sham. It was just a charade or charade, whatever you want to say it. That James Robinson was going off, so I traded him early off in the season. He still ended up producing, finished real good. James Robinson's value is now definitely tampered with this Travis Etienne pick. A winner is Sam Darnold and that Panthers offense. Sam Darnold really never had a new he never had new weapons, great weapons, or his team really do much for him. The best receiver of the game was Jamison Crowder, and that's not saying too much. So this year, he's on the Panthers, and they used all of their second-round picks on things for the quarterback. They got wide receiver Terrence Marshall Jr. out of LSU, who has a build of a Justin Jefferson. He is one of the better receivers. I've mentioned him in my top 10 top 10 NFL prospects going into the draft. Terrence Marshall is more of an outside receiver, so I imagine they would put DJ more in the slot, and they would have Robbie Anderson opposite side of him, and they would have Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. All the weapons for Sam Darnold is helping. It's going to help so much. They also got another offensive tackle, Brady Christensen, who was one of the better ones, in the second round, and they got Tommy Tremble, a tight end. So they helped out because Greg Olsen just retired and he's not playing for the Panthers anymore. So now they need to fill that hole. Filled it. They need another receiver after they lost a good slot gadget receiver in Curtis Samuel to the Washington football team. So now it's time for Sam Darnold. He has all the weapons he needs. He has a great slot receiver. He has a great 2 outside receivers. He has a decent tight end. We'll see how Tommy Tremble develops. And he has one of the better running backs in the league, especially fantasy value-wise. Christian McCaffrey is a top 2, top 3 pick. They also added running back from Oregon State, Chuba Hubbard, to fill the void of Mike Davis, since Mike Davis is gone and now on. And right now, probably the lead back for the Atlanta Falcons. Sam Darnold should feel comfortable with all the weapons he finally has. Another winner is Kyle Trask. Kyle Trask fell to the second round, and he was the only quarterback actually taken in the second round. And guess what? Now he's going to be the apprentice to Tom Brady, one of the best quarterbacks, not really one of the best quarterbacks, more like one of the best football players in NFL history. Trask still had a good year in Florida, and he's staying in his hometown. Going from Florida to Tampa, not a far commute. He finished last year with 4,200 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He's 6'5", 240 pounds. So he's able to, be a good, tall quarterback like Tom Brady. He's also not as athletic like Tom Brady. So Tom Brady will teach him how to get out of high-pressure situations with a lack of mobility. Who's a better teacher than Tom Brady? I don't know, and I don't think that it matters because Kyle Trask will at least be also able to step in and hopefully be able to take on that Brady role and start a dynasty for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if Brady were to leave within the next couple of years, which I don't know. That man looks like he's going to play till 50. He was still a top 10 fantasy quarterback last year, and I still don't understand it. I don't understand it. So Kyle Trask, not someone I would say draft, but I would say he's at least in dynasty leagues. If you play in a league where you have you hold on to players even going into the off season, Kyle Trask is someone to keep an eye on because of his potential. He's going to still have weapons like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I just don't know if he'd have Antonio Brown because Antonio Brown loves Tom Brady. That's the only reason why it looks like he's staying there. The Tampa Bay offense is loaded. If Tom Brady, for some magical reason, were to get hurt because he is old, remember everyone, Kyle Trask would be someone to take a look at this year, but I would never draft him. It was just something that I would say, okay, he's a good one. He is going to do well under Tom Brady as an apprentice, and hopefully Tom Brady will be able to rub off on him. And a huge, huge winner is the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears, I didn't want to say it too early and say it like on the top of the show just because you never know with Chicago, but I think that they did what they did and exceeded expectations, especially after everyone is not letting them live after they drafted Mr. Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson a couple of years back. Mr. Trubisky is now not on the Bears roster anymore. He's on the Buffalo Bills as a backup to Josh Allen. And the starting quarterback was supposed to be Andy Dalton, but they moved up for Justin Fields. And not only that, then they moved up again the second day to get an offensive tackle, Tevin Jenkins, who did not allow a sack in his last 2 seasons at Oklahoma State. Jenkins was supposed to be a first-round tackle, so we'll see what Ryan Pace is doing, because Ryan Pace is someone that I've been bad-mouthing on the show, and he made kind of a big move. But if you kind of think about it, Mike Wilbon brought up a good point too. The Bears quarterbacks and Ohio State quarterbacks, not much of a difference. You don't really you get some talented guys, but nothing ever to brag or go home about. The best Ohio State quarterback, you can't really say. There really wasn't a good Ohio State quarterback that ended up thriving or being a top Hall of Fame caliber person in the NFL. Same thing about the Bears. The Bears' best quarterback of all time was Jim McMahon, who wasn't even a great thrower. They've never had a thrower that's thrown over 4,000 yards. It's sad. They're one of the worst quarterback factory teams. That's Jim McMahon said in the offseason too. That is where quarterbacks go to die, because you're not reviving your career if you're on the Bears. If you just think of all the Bears quarterbacks too, maybe you could even say Jay Cutler was their best quarterback of all time, but I wouldn't go that far to say Jay Cutler was that good. He brought him to NFC Championship once, which was a good, it was good enough for the Bears to be happy about. But the Bears are still old school, still traditional. They still want to win championships, and I don't think that Jay Cutler going to the NFC Championship is anything to brag about as well. They went to Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, which just shows you what they do without quarterbacks too. So I guess hopefully this model changes. Justin Fields is a mobile quarterback. This should definitely boost the value of Allen Robinson, boost the value of Dave Montgomery, especially if they start doing some RPO, run pass options. Maybe they'll fake it off to Dave Montgomery, Justin Fields takes off, or they'll hand it off, and people will be too threatened to load the box, because Justin Fields does have a cannon too. One of the better quarterbacks, did go to the national championship last year. Kind of got smacked against Alabama, but it's okay. This is the NFL now. He has a clean slate. The Chicago Bears just aren't anything to brag about. They didn't really throw the ball that well last year. They were 21st in the NFL in total passing yards per game with 231. They allowed 63% throwing. That's a lot. They allowed 20 rushing touchdowns too, which ranked top 2 in the NFL. So their defense isn't too hot right now. So that they're going to be on the offensive end probably a little more than you're used to this Bears defense kind of allowing. So they have to put up these points. They're going to need to score, especially if that defense continues to allow that many rushing yards per game, or that many yards per game just in general going into next year. And then that's going to put pressure on Dalton if they start him. Because remember, they did say that Dalton was going to be the starter, and he was led under the impression that he's supposed to be the starter until Justin Fields is now here. It's probably going to be a quarterback battle, and it looks like Andy Dalton's time is also like Kirk Cousins. It's ticking. It's almost time's up. Another winner, New York Jets. I would draft probably Allen Robinson, which if Justin Fields is quarterback, top 3 rounds. 3rd round. I like Jamar Chase still a little better, or he's, if not, on the same level. Dave Montgomery, I would still wait till the 7th round. Dave Montgomery is a great running back, but he does get hurt. It is the Bears, and Tyreek Cohen is going to come back and still take away from his value. Don't forget that Tyreek Cohen was gone for most of the year last year. But yes, a winner I also have are the Jets. And it's not that they're winning in the sense of, that was you did super, super amazing. It was just winning in the sense of, wow, you're trying to get a little better. I see. You got Zach Wilson with your 2nd pick, who showed that he's a purely capable quarterback. He threw for over 72% of his he completed 72% of his throws last season. And they added Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, Jamison Crowder, Denzel Mims. They also added Michael Carter, running back from North Carolina, who was the backup running back. Not really. It was more like a split running back duty with him and Javonte Williams. They both rushed for 1,000 yards. Michael Carter showed that he was capable of more of being the pass-catching guy. That's exactly what they needed. Tevin Coleman is not what they needed at all. They also ended up getting Elijah Moore, wide receiver out of Ole Miss, who caught over 1,000 yards last year. He could be a good slot receiver, especially for Jamison Crowder, Denzel Mims, and Corey Davis, who are going to probably line up on the outside. They had Elijah Vera-Tucker with their 14th pick in the 1st round out of USC, which was perfect for them because that's going to help out with the protection of Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is probably going to get one of the better shots out of all these quarterbacks coming out of the draft, but I would still probably draft Trey Lance ahead of him than Zach Wilson if I'm doing fantasy. But Zach Wilson, I don't know if you take a flyer on him, but they added more weapons. The Jets are definitely winners after this. Another winner, because they added a quarterback, is the New England Patriots. They added quarterback from Alabama, Mac Jones, who led the whole FBS in passing yards at 4,200, and he was second in passing touchdowns. Now he is on the New England Patriots. You figure that if Cam Newton has one bad game or gets hurt, and especially since he's more of a mobile rushing quarterback, and he's more likely to, that Mac Jones is finally going to get the start. This is somewhere where quarterbacks are usually built pretty good. Jimmy G was built there. Tom Brady was built off Bill Belichick. He could make Mac Jones into a special quarterback. If anywhere for Mac Jones to go and get great guidance from a coach that is really well respected, especially probably just as stubborn as his former coach Nick Saban, they're going to like him. Mac Jones, the reason why everyone liked him in the draft was because he was a great system quarterback, and you could put him in any system and it would work. That's exactly how Bill Belichick likes it. I'm a system type of guy. Work in my system and you'll be good. And that's what Mac Jones does. Those were all the winners and losers from the draft day. Stick around at the end of the episode as we go over my top 10 rookies in fantasy football going to next year. Top 10. Doesn't matter the position. They're finally on their teams. I'm going to give you just 10 guys that I like ranking from 1 to 10 when we come back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Thanks again for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We are still here talking about the draft. I was giving my winners and losers throughout the show. A lot of things that got flipped on its head during draft week. And it's not all about the drafting too. Aaron Rodgers made it about himself and then wanted to leave. And now who even knows where he's going to go and change everybody's fantasy draft implications. Oh, well, I also forgot to say that a loser's Tyrod Taylor, because they drafted Davis Mills from Stanford University with the 67th pick, which is still pretty high if you really think about it. Not a top pick, but still high. It looks like that they're going to probably go and turn to him as soon as they're done with Tyrod Taylor. Kind of similar like what the Chargers did with Tyrod Taylor as well. Poor Tyrod Taylor can't catch a break. But I'm going to give my top 10 fantasy rookies. I'm talking about fantasy perspective, what they're going to do now, what it looks like, especially built around their offenses. We're going to start off with my number 10 top fantasy rookie going into the 2021 season, Elijah Moore. He is an Ole Miss receiver going on to the Jets. He's going to have a great opportunity. Jamison Crowder is usually really injury prone, but he was still getting a lot of love in that Jets offense. Robert Saleh is a better coach as well. He's going to know how to use the Ole Miss product. Ole Miss produces great receivers. A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, just to say a few. So you know that you can rely on him, and you can kind of rely on Ole Miss receivers just as a whole. He also had 86 catches, 1,193 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. A 90-yard touchdown as well. Just shows you the type of speed that Elijah Moore has. I like Elijah Moore in his offense, especially with Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is going to make sure that he kind of sticks to his MO, which is I'm going to throw good high percentage throws, because you don't do that. You don't throw 72% in a whole season if you're not going to always be a great decisive person. Elijah Moore has great separation speed, one of the top 5 better rookie receivers coming out of the draft. I like him in the now as a Jets receiver. Denzel Mims hasn't proven himself too much. Jamison Crowder's too injury prone. It's going to be Corey Davis. They'll have him. Keelan Cole still hasn't put himself in that offense yet, so who knows how he's going to be. Elijah Moore, someone that I would get in the 12th, 13th, 14th round as a flyer and see, you know what? We'll see what happens. Like, worst that could happen is who knows? He'll just be someone I could drop on the waiver wire. Best that could happen, he's A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf. Only reason I'm a little smaller, well, that's the reason why. The only reason why I'm lower on the list than I should have, 1, he's on the Jets still, and 2, he's only 5'9", 185. Definitely not as big as DK Metcalf or A.J. Brown. Number 9, I have quarterback Justin Fields out of Ohio State. He threw for over 2,100 yards last year, 22 touchdowns. Year before that, 41 touchdowns, 3,200 yards. He only had 6 interceptions with his 22 touchdowns, threw 70%, went to the national championship, fell short, but he's on this Bears offense. He has a wide receiver 1 in Allen Robinson. He does have a good tight end in Cole Kmet, came out of Notre Dame. I expect him to have at least like 500 yards going into next season. This is his second year. He also has Darnell Mooney, who's one of the better rookie receivers last year, but now going into his second year. So he has the weapons. He also has Dave Montgomery and Tyreek Cohen, hopefully coming back from that ACL injury. His mobility, what the Bears kind of want with their offense and how they want it now, and they need a mobile quarterback to kind of stretch out the fields and always make sure that there's a linebacker spine. Justin Fields will be perfect. He's going to be thrown into the spotlight pretty soon. I don't see the Bears waiting long. You don't move up to the 11th pick if you don't want this guy a lot. I feel like they've been waiting for a franchise quarterback since Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson slander has been coming around after they drafted Mitchell Trubisky high. So they're out here to prove themselves. They're not going to try to make a mistake. Matt Nagy's tired of losing. He swears he's this quarterback. He's this guru. But Justin Fields is so good to me. I think that he could put a lot of Band-Aids on that Bears offense. Definitely one of the better quarterbacks they've had, especially from a fantasy perspective, since Justin Fields can get mobile as well. The number 8 fantasy rookie going into next year for me is Michael Carter, another Jets running back. Yes, I'm not high on the Jets as an organization, but just know that Tevin Coleman is the only running back there, and he got hurt. Michael Carter has definitely shown that he's capable of leading the backfield. Even though he split carries with Javonte Williams, he was crazy efficient and good. He had only 156 carries last year for 1,245 yards, getting 8 yards per carry and 9 touchdowns. This is splitting it with Javonte Williams, who was on the Broncos. Also, he had in 2019, the year before that, he rushed 170 times only for another 1,000 yards, having over 5 yards per carry. Throughout his whole collegiate career, he had 3,400 yards, 22 touchdowns, and averaged 6.6 yards per carry. And he's a good pass-catching back if Zach Wilson needs to throw those completions. Remember, he wants to keep that completion percentage up because that's just kind of his MO in college. Wants to make sure he throws accurate, decisive passes. He's going to check down to the running back, and Michael Carter's capable of that. And if in PPR leagues, he is perfect. He had 82 catches for 656 yards and 6 touchdowns throughout college. An opportunity to show out real early. And since the Jets added all these weapons, they added a better quarterback, I am more confident that Michael Carter will have a better chance to shine. I like him a lot going into next year. He's my number 8 fantasy rookie going into next year. Number 7, fantasy rookie going into next year, Alabama wide receiver Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle is going to be reunited with Tua on that team on an injury-prone wide receiving core. Like I said, Devontae Parker out 5 games last year. Will Fuller, after week 12, he was out. Mike Gesicki is also another one that was on that receiving core that also got injured. Jalen Waddle is someone that would work perfect in that Brian Flores type of offense. They are all about big play abilities and scoring, in quick succession, because their defense is pretty stout, top 5 overall last year, and a top 5 fantasy defense as well, because they know how to create turnovers. They had Xavier Howard, who had 10 interceptions last year. Jalen Waddle is going to be a perfect addition as a slot receiver on that Miami Dolphins offense. I like him going into next year, and I feel like he has a potential of getting over 1,000 yards, especially if all those receivers were to go down and he were just to be with his boy Tua. Let's go on to the number 6 rookie I have coming out of the draft. It is Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon hasn't cemented himself as a number 1 running back. It is apparent because the Denver Broncos moved up to get Javonte Williams in the second round. Javonte Williams had 157 carries for 1,100 yards and 19 touchdowns last year. He's a touchdown machine, averaging 7.3 yards per carry. He's a tough runner, more of a running back, not as much of a catcher, but he's still very vital in that offense. So if anything, Melvin Gordon might even be a third down back, and Javonte Williams could be a heavy bruiser back that they see in the red zone. If an Aaron Rodgers were to go to this offense, which is still a potential, it's a high potential that it could happen, because he's narrowed it down to those 2 teams, and he's very unhappy with the Green Bay Packers, that Javonte Williams will be able to be an Aaron Jones on that Denver Broncos team. I like him because Melvin Gordon hasn't proven anything to us in fantasy too much, and if you're going to draft Melvin Gordon in fantasy for some reason next year, which you shouldn't, but if you're going to draft him for some reason, you better handcuff him with Javonte Williams, because if Melvin Gordon gets hurt, like he has on the Chargers, like he did on some games for the Broncos last year, he also got a DUI last year, so he's kind of a troublemaker. And who knows how much his confidence is going to be hurt. He said just a couple weeks ago that he was hurt, that he feels underappreciated and feels that no one really, thinks that he's a prime running back, one of the top 10, because he's not. He's really not, and I don't know why he thinks that, but he could keep on thinking on. No one wanted to give him top running back money when he went to free agency, so it shows you what other people think about him and what he really is and what the market value is for him. So Javonte Williams could step into that role, have a great quarterback. They have a great receiving core to stretch it out. The Broncos like to run the ball first most of the time. Phillip Lindsay isn't there. I like him a lot going into the next season. So let's move on to number 5. We're going to go into the top 5 fantasy rookies that came out of the draft from a fantasy perspective, what they're going to do now, what team they're on, and what the situation and the offense is going to look like with them. We want people who are going to score a lot of fantasy points, so I'm kind of helping you out on where you should kind of draft, in what order you should draft the rookies. And if the rookies are gone, then you could just keep looking down this list. I already said Elijah Moore at 10, Justin Fields at 9, Michael Carter at 8, Jalen Waddle at 7. And now we're going to go on to 5. Oh, I said Javonte Williams at 6. Number 5, though, is Trevor Lawrence, quarterback out of Clemson. He was the number 1 pick last year. In Clemson, he's thrown for over 10,000 yards, 3,000 yards every single year. Has a total completion percentage of 66.6%. Last year he threw for 69%. In his championship year before that, he threw 65%. He's had championship games against Alabama. He's 6'6", 213. He's one of the better prospects coming out of the draft since Andrew Luck, John Elway, Peyton Manning, all these great prospects. He's up there, and that is the potential of Trevor Lawrence. He's going to get the start right away. They don't trust Minshew. Urban Meyer is also their coach, so he could kind of help out with that college offense. He's also paired up with his boy Travis Etienne. They got weapons. They have a great possession receiver in Marvin Jones. They have a great fly receiver in Laviska Shenault. And they also have DJ Chark, who's proven that he could be a wide receiver 1. They needed a tight end, but it's okay. Trevor Lawrence also has a good rushing ability. So not only is he accurate, he's mobile. That gives you a lot of promise. Next year, he could have Justin Herbert type of numbers, if not better. We'll see how Trevor Lawrence does on the Jacksonville Jaguars. But he's my 5th ranked rookie prospect coming out of the 2021 draft. Number 4, I have Travis Etienne. Yes, I actually have him above him. I said that James Robinson was going to be a loser, and a big reason why is because Trevor Lawrence's boy is Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne had over 4,900 yards through his collegiate career. Last year, it was cut short. It had less games, so he was only able to rush for 914 yards, but he still had 5 yards per carry and 14 touchdowns. If you go from his 2018 season, his 2019 season, championship years, and games where they went to the championship, he had 1,600 yards, 8 yards per carry, 24 touchdowns. Next year, 1,600 yards, 7.8 yards per carry, 19 touchdowns. He's basically averaging 20 touchdowns, 8 yards per carry, and 1,630 yards through 2 years at Clemson. This guy could be dominant. He could catch. He's aggressive. He's a strong runner. He's a 3-down back. James Robinson, they could easily make him the 3rd-down back, or like someone who just carries it once or twice. Travis Etienne is going to at least get 15 to 18 touches a game, and he's going to make them count, especially since he's playing with his boy Trevor Lawrence. That duo just makes it easier for me to choose them from a fantasy perspective, because they're going to get the go-ahead now. Travis Etienne's going to probably be a top 5 pick. Not top 5 pick. A top 5 round pick to me, just because he's going to have a great opportunity. They didn't get anything much with James Robinson, they didn't expect much from James Robinson. So him being a good runner is just, wow, this is a plus. But remember, they're 4th worst in rushing. They could the Browns have kind of paved the model. The Ravens, a lot of these teams have paved models of like, hey, we could have 2, prime running backs like Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. That's what they're going to try to do with James Robinson. So he has a lot of fantasy value still, Travis Etienne, even with James Robinson, the number 4 ranked running back last year, lurking behind. Let's move on to the number 3 fantasy rookie going into next year. Kyle Pitts, tight end from Florida. 43 catches, 770 yards, 12 touchdowns, 17 yards per catch. Great red zone target. Was a big reason why Kyle Trask had a big year last year. Kyle Pitts is going to be perfect on that offense. If Julio gets hurt, Calvin gets hurt, anybody gets hurt, it's a go for Kyle Pitts all day, every day. He's going to be their number 1 tight end. Matt Ryan loves his tight ends. You saw what he did with Tony Gonzalez when he was there. Austin Hooper when he was there as well. Matt Ryan is going to have to be put in a lot of throwing situations because the Falcons have one of the worst defenses in the league. And with the attention that Julio Jones is going to warrant, and Calvin Ridley especially jumping onto the scene last year and being one of the top 5 fantasy receivers last year, I would recommend getting him in the first 2 rounds. Kyle Pitts, he's probably going to be the 3rd best tight end next year. If George Kittle gets hurt like he does, I'd draft Kyle Pitts over George Kittle just for how good Kyle Pitts is. He's 6'6", huge, great offense that has a terrible defense, so they're always going to be on the field. Matt Ryan, who's a consistent quarterback, especially when it comes to giving production to his fantasy receivers more than actually helping the Atlanta Falcons. He led the league in completions for 8 years running. Matt Ryan is a good quarterback for 8 years. I meant 6 years running. Matt Ryan is a good quarterback for Kyle Pitts. And they're going to have to get in the red zone. Red zone was their biggest problem last year. They had one of the worst red zone touchdown percentages. So Kyle Pitts is going to fill that void. They drafted him with the 4th pick. So all I'm saying is they're going to put all the marbles in on Kyle Pitts. Now, what he does with it is up to him, but I feel like Kyle Pitts is not going to botch it, and I feel like it's going to be just a connection, just a match made in heaven between those two. Number 2 fantasy rookie going into the NFL, Jamar Chase, 84 catches, 1,780 yards, and 20 touchdowns, averaging 21 yards per catch. Yeah, you're going to say, oh, wait, but that was just with the quarterback from college. Well, he's actually playing in the NFL with that quarterback, and they got him over one of the better offensive linemen when the Bengals need offensive linemen, and Joe Burrow gets hurt a lot, and Joe Mixon gets hurt a lot. Jamar Chase is going to be the bright spot on this offense next to T. Higgins, just because they get open so well. Jamar Chase has shown what he could do with Joe Burrow, and they have a good receiving core, so you can't just focus on Jamar Chase, especially his rookie year. They're going to have to spread the focus to Tyler Boyd, spread some focus to T. Higgins, who still was a great PPR machine last year, and I think is definitely getting a fantasy stock boost. Jamar Chase, I would draft probably in the 3rd, 4th round. I like his potential a lot. We already saw what he could do with Joe Burrow, and he's supposed to be better than Justin Jefferson. Last year he didn't play. He opted out so he could be ready for the draft. It's his time. Let's go. Jamar Chase, definitely one of the better ones. He would have been the best one if it wasn't for this number one guy I have been mentioning all day long, and I've always been saying, oh, well, what if Najee Harris just went to the Steelers? Well, the number one, he went to the Steelers. He had over 250 carries last year, which shows that he could be a bruiser. He's over 230 pounds, which shows that he could be a bruiser. 1,466 yards, averaging 5.8 yards per carry, so showing that he can run the ball well, with 26 rushing touchdowns only on top of 8 touchdowns receiving. Najee Harris is a dual threat running back who's in an offense. If you think about Le'Veon Bell and James Conner, before James Conner was really not doing any helping out the Steelers offense, that's why they stopped giving it to him. Those guys get milked so much once they realize Anthony McFarland, Benny Snell, all these guys, whoever they have, are nowhere near as close to the first round. And they got him in the first round. They got the first running back out of the first round. So that goes to show you what they're probably going to do with him. I love Najee Harris. I would get him in the 2nd or 3rd round going into next year. And that was the top 10 fantasy rookies that came out of this year's draft. I like them, especially because their team, their situation, and what the team is going to do with them. Thank you again for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Remember to like, share, subscribe us, YouTube, Twitter, you know the deal. I'll be here later on in the week, and we'll talk more about these rookies and get more in depth with these teams. But for now, thank you for listening, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.